getting to spend time on YouTube with you guys. If you are watching us right now, thank you. Thank you for coming on board and being a part of this, whether it's on the Facebook page. I posted the Riverside link there, or it can also be on our YouTube channel. And this will be up on the YouTube channel for probably as long as YouTube exists. So maybe forever. Well, we'll see. I don't know how it's going to work in the future, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Hebrews chapter 11, which is one of the more famous chapters. And it's famous because it does a great job of pointing to the Old Testament and reminding us in the Old Testament of all of these great characters of faith. So we have Noah, we have Abraham, we don't have David, we have so many different characters of faith, and the name that is given is very often the Hall of Faith. So it's like the author of Hebrews is walking down the hall and saying, "Hey, look at that, and look at what they've done, and look at their faith," and it's an encouragement to us. And then this week we'll go to Hebrews chapter 12, and we'll talk about the after Hebrews 11. What does he say? So in light of Hebrews 11, what does he say in Hebrews chapter 12? So see you on Sunday. Still doing our questions, which is going great. And so in service, people can write questions, or if you watch it later, you can send questions at alcrpv.org, and we'll answer questions as they come up. And you can answer or email questions in, and then I can answer them here. So not just the ones I answered in worship, with the people that were right there, right then, but also ones that come in later. So yeah, please take the time to ask, to email, because here I am ready to answer and spend some time with you on YouTube. Okay, so let's go to this question here. What does it mean to obtain a better resurrection? Is it speaking of a different type or additional reward in heaven for things done in faith? Now, when we go to the text and we look for this kind of phrasing, I believe the verse that is being referred to is can be referred to in different ways in different translations. It says chapter 39, I'm sorry, verse 39 and 40 of Hebrews 11. Yet all these things, all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Also, and I think this is a telling verse as well, also in verse chapter 11, again, of course, verses 15 and 16, if they had been thinking of the land that they had left behind, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them. So that word better were the two places that I found in my translation, Hebrews chapter 11, that would look like this idea of better resurrection. And maybe I'm missing one in 11, but I tried to find those. And I think the better there, so what is the better? Is it a better room in heaven? Do you have better clothes in heaven? The better that he's referring to is actually the better than receiving whatever they were believing in faith that they were going to have. They were going to receive something better. And so that was the better that they're referring to, not a better resurrection, so you get a better room in heaven, but instead a if you had received this in faith, that would have been a good thing. You were waiting, Abraham, he was waiting for the land. Moses was waiting to go into the promised land. If they had received that, that would have been good. They received those things. But the better is the waiting on God, and then we will have resurrection life with God without sin, in total intimacy with Him. So, in faith, because remember that part of the Hebrews chapter 11 is saying that in faith, these people didn't receive in this life what they were hoping for. They were waiting for something and they didn't receive it. but they're waiting for the better. The better is what they'll receive in um, in the life to come. And so, yes, they had to wait, but what they waited for was better. Now, in case I am missing another verse, I do want to talk about, just for a quick second, this idea of treasures in heaven, because there are other, Jesus says, right? Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And there are other verses that kind of wink to this. And I think we need to acknowledge that even if there are, for serving the poor or for living a life of faith, there are some heavenly rewards. There are two things to keep in mind. The first is, and I love the way that this was said by a woman in the Bible study I taught. She said, even if we get nicer crowns in heaven, remember, all of us end up laying our crowns down at the foot of the king anyway. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have a nicer crown, because your crown is just one of the many. And the second goes along right with that, and that is the fact that jealousy, greed, those things that separate us, oh, they have better than I do. They have more than I do. And that feeling that comes when that happens, those things are going to be gone. We're going to live in a place of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self control. I'm not going to be actively wanting to steal and take from you. Instead, I can celebrate what you have and you can celebrate what I have. I don't need to look at it and go, oh, sure wish I had that house, or sure wish I had that car, or sure wish I had those clothes. Instead, you can say, praise God. Praise God, you have that and I have this. And that is a gift, right? So I think that's important for us to not just automatically assume that because there might be, and again, those verses, we're not in those, so I don't want to spend time saying whether or not there are, because there's interesting cases on both sides. But in the ultimate, the reason I think what's most important is, ultimately it doesn't matter, because one, we're all going to give it back to God as the center and source of everything, and two, there's not going to be any hostility, jealousy, wrath, greed that separates us one from another. We are together in intimacy. Okay, so that is that one. Another, so in a little couple different places with that, but it was good. Okay, another question. How can we be reminded of our faith and the assurance of things hoped for in the midst of trials and anxiety of this world? This is such a great question, because we did some talk about James 1 next week, this Sunday coming up in Hebrews 12. We're going to talk about similar things here because he's talking to a church that's persecuted. And so part of the answer of this is wait for the sermon in Hebrews chapter 12. But I do think that we can answer this partly here, and that is going into Hebrews chapter 12, where it says, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. I think that the primary way that we can do this is by the encouragement of one another. That when we get stuck in our own heads, when we get to just think about things from our perspective, consider the way that we've been wronged, consider all of our feelings, that it can become unbearable and it can feel impossible to go through. When we get the privilege of opening ourselves up to somebody else, talking to them, hearing their heart, hearing their perspective, us sharing what's going on, and then being able to hear back, I think that gives us an ability to go through situations, trials, anxieties, troubles that are impossible to bear alone. God, 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has seized you except what's common to man, but God is faithful. He'll be not let you be tempted, but you can bear. How do you bear things? I think you bear them together. I think you bear them cooperatively. So we talked about this on Sunday, but there are times that my faith will fail me. I won't have enough faith to go through. But that's when I need your faith. I need your faith to encourage me. And so that's the gift there of community, is that we have people who, if they know the trouble that we're going through, they're able to speak into us. Remember when God has done this? Remember how God has done this thing. Remember how God was faithful in that way. And then you have the privilege of being able to work together and speak and uh, work in unity to encourage one another, of mutual encouragement. So that to me is one of the big answers, is to have others around you who know what is going on, who know the difficulty, and who are able to carry you when your faith is low, and also able to speak to you about God's faithfulness. A practical thing that you could do if you want, someone at one point got me a jar, and they had people write down wonderful memories of ministry, and so that when I was feeling discouraged, I could take them out and read them. That's another thing. Keep a prayer journal. Be reminded of God's faithfulness. Be reminded of the times He has shown up. Because in the times where you feel like, oh, it's not working, nothing's happening, this is all bad, you then will be able to be reminded of His faithfulness by reading, oh yeah, that time I felt similarly. I felt in despair, but God showed up. So I would maybe encourage you to do that as well. So community being a huge one, and then some kind of external reminders, prayer journals, little notes to yourself about God's faithfulness, reminders in your calendar of maybe things that God has done on this date in the past in my life. Oh, I'm celebrating this anniversary that God showed up and answered this prayer. I don't know, whatever it is that works for you. It is in looking back that we celebrate God's faithfulness to remind us of moving forward, not to get hung up on our sin or our issues, but to remind us that God is the faithful one in the future as well. Okay? So, great questions today. Really enjoy it. Hebrews chapter 12. We're having tacos. We're having the blessing of the backpacks. Boy, we have a lot of stuff coming up this Sunday. So, I hope you can be there. Look forward to seeing you. Talk to you guys later. Bye.